This podcast provides a platform for our guests to express their own personal views and opinions. Some or all of these views and opinions may not be shared by Ben and/or Yoel.
Welcome to the Too Dad to Quit podcast,
The podcast where we highlight stories of dads on the other side of divorce.
to inspire and give strength to dads going through it.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Yoel.
Just want a friendly reminder to subscribe and review and like the podcast, and don't forget to share. And if you know anybody who would be a great guest, we want to hear from them. So please have them get in touch with us. This week we have Rabbi Dovid Poston, who originally is from the Philadelphia area. He grew up in a traditional Jewish house, and through that, growing up in that tradition, he went searching, and he was constantly searching through his early teens to find something worth meaning. And he had a search all through the religions, and he found a rabbi that turned him on to Orthodox Judaism. And he's been on a journey through life after that discovery and that love. He was married for a number of years, had 6 kids.
Yep, 6 kids.
6 kids, and unfortunately, one day it was pretty much over, and he found himself a rabbi that was divorced, that had 6 kids in a small apartment and managing that until today, where he has since remarried and has a beautiful home, and has just opened up his own organization, and just a very, very thought-provoking person with a very interesting background and insights. And you'll hear very soon, Yoel picks his brain quite a bunch. And you know, his worldly background and his knowledge and being a rabbi for so long, he has a lot of insights, you know, not just for Judaism, but for life and relationships as well.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And he's got this organization you talked about. He founded and has been running. It's called Yibaneh. He's been running it for a number of years. And I found that he was really eloquent and articulate in sort of taking us through not only his own background, like you were saying, but also the whole idea of what love means, you know, how divorce can impact oneself, one's family, one's relationship with children, and how he was able to sort of learn from his experiences and grow from them, and, you know, make himself that much better in his new relationship with his wife. He's happily married. I can say from personal experience, he's hosted me. We live in the same area in Jerusalem, and he's hosted me a number of times. He's very gracious. He really, you know, not only talks the talk, and he talks a lot for his organization, but he also walks the walk. And I think that our audience will really benefit from the way he describes everything. Particularly what stands out for me is the process of love. He talked about what love means in the Hebrew, really the Aramaic language. He talked about that, you know, comes from ahava, to give. I'm not going to give it all away now, but just the way he sort of gives that behind the scenes look into love and marriage and divorce and all the different things that we talk about on this podcast. I think he really brings it together nicely.
Yeah, and one thing he talked about a lot was that the man and woman relationship, that the woman is kind of like the opposite and like counterintuitive, that 2 people would get together that are polar opposites and make things work. But in reality, it's designed that way so that you complement each other and someone is keeping you honest. And so enjoy.
Super excited to have a very esteemed guest with us today, Rabbi Poston. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. And Rabbi Poston is the Director of Education and Events for Yibaneh Jerusalem, which is an organization he founded to promote unity through education and kindness. Rabbi Poston is an ordained rabbi and teaches classes on a wide array of subjects, and you can watch many of these on the popular Yibaneh YouTube channel, which we're going to link you to on our YouTube channel. Rabbi Poston is originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and has lived in Jerusalem, Israel since 1988. Rabbi Poston has 6 children and a grandchild, another on the way, and has been married to Bina Sujanani for the last 9 years. Did I get that right? 2009, right? Okay. Okay, great. And I want to add a personal note as well, that I moved to this area of Jerusalem a couple of years ago, and Rabbi Poston you've been absolutely amazing to me. I've eaten at your house many times, you and your wife Bina, very welcoming and warm.
There's good dish, you don't eat too much.
That's what they say. But I'm really, really grateful for all the kindness you've showed me, and including today, being a guest on the show. So welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
All right. Fantastic.
So, Rabbi Poston, we want to kind of give a background first before we get into the heavy nitty-gritty stuff. So, from what I hear from Yoel, you have quite the background. So, if you can share with our audience who you are, what makes you you, and what brought you that way, along the whole road.
I'll give you a 58-year story. However, I'm on my second marriage. I was married for 18 years. I'm married almost 14 years, into the 14th year. And I'm originally from Philadelphia. I grew up in a very secular but proud Jewish home. My parents are still married, and there's a lot to be said. I mean, in our family, divorce was really, I'm going to say, unheard of. And perhaps we looked at people who had broken marriages as a failure to a certain extent. So when I went through my own breakup and eventual divorce, I would say it was quite painful. So I already jumped decades. So I grew up in a proud, secular Jewish home with certain values, especially when it came to family, was like number one. We always had cousins clubs, distant cousins. We just always kept in touch with family. It was like I would say, ingrained as something so valuable.
Sure.
Religion was more cultural for us. So anyway, just if you want to hear some of the greasy stuff. So I was young and irresponsible and dabbled in drugs and sex and rock and roll. And eventually when I was 16, I had a spiritual awakening, and I saw it like a more moral type of lifestyle. And so it took me to many different places, like 12-step programs and churches and church basements, all kinds of spiritual possibilities. And so I don't know how much you want to hear about.
Whatever you want to share.
Yeah, we want to hear it all.
From yoga to Eastern thought and meditations. I read a lot. I think I was well read when it came to other religions.
This is all in Philadelphia?
Yeah, actually it was. It was all in Philadelphia. And so it was like a 7-year journey until I met my first Orthodox rabbi.
And who was that?
It was Rabbi Yohanan's wife, a very big rabbi.
He's in Florida. Okay. That's my friend's uncle. Yeah.
So I had, what's the word? I chose like what I thought was the truth of each religion. Because many religions have such beauty, and in my opinion now, that those beautiful things all came from Judaism, not knowing then at the time. So basically, when I had met this first big rabbi, it was what an eye-opener. An eye-opener to the point that I said, wow, everything that I had gleaned from all these different religions were actually right here in front of me within Judaism.
It's like that story of the Israeli kid who goes to India to meet with the biggest monk, and he says, I want to convert. And the monk says, well, what religion are you? Like, what's your family? Is there any religion? He says, I'm a Jew. He goes, go back to Israel.
Right. What was really fascinating with the 12-step program in particular was that I had what they call sponsors, mentors. And they were actually sponsored by people who were sponsored by the originators of Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson. And they had these, we call it oral Torah secrets. I call it oral Torah today. And what they passed down, even though I was born a Jew and I had some basic understanding that we were in Egypt and we left Egypt, I used to go to my grandparents' home for Pesach, Passover, Seder, the ritual of 4 cups and eating the matzah and whatnot, and the retelling of the story of how people were in Egypt. So the secret that Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson had passed down and was quite I think underestimated within the 12-step program, people don't talk about. But they told me, they said, the secret to being released or rescued or redeemed from bondage is the secret of the Israelites when they left Egypt. And I guess I didn't pay it no mind, but I didn't know how to relate to that. Even as a Jew.
How did they explain that? What was that thing that Jews did when they left?
Well, there was a very popular book, trying to remember the actual author, but it was a famous philosopher, I think it was Young, that speak about, it's called Not God. Now, having a title called Not God, you wonder, because, in these 12-step programs, basically, you think you are God, or you think you are invincible. You can live forever, you can do whatever you want, there's no responsibilities or whatever. The idea of not God, the introduction basically is, you're not God, because you think you are. So the idea is that you're not God, and within this framework, was this idea that going back to ancient Jewish wisdom, and you understand that even the word Mitzrayim, which means Egypt in Hebrew, is a tight constricted place. And everyone knows the word slavery, right? We were slaves in Egypt, but the concept of bondage. And therefore, when you are addicted, or you think you're addicted, or you have a personality characteristics, what you are, there's a popular phrase called a monkey on your back. Basically, you are in bondage. You're in this dark place and you don't see any way out. And there is a light and there is an opening and there is a way. Now, just to go through, like from the beginning of the 12-step program until, let's say, almost, present day, when they started, they were basically born-again, Bible-thumping Christians. And so, not to offend any of your listeners, but whatever is true in what they call the New Testament, whatever is new is not true. Whatever is true is not new. And so, therefore, whatever worked for these, I'll call them again, these Bible-thumping, born-again Christians, was what they gleaned from their New Testament, which is, not to offend anybody, but it's a plagiarism. All the good stuff came from the Jewish Bible. So there's a lot of truth. So that's basically, in a nutshell, how they do understand, or at least promoted this idea secretly, that the secret of release from bondage was foretold, let's say, in the story of the Exodus from Egypt by the Jews, and basically the big book, the original big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, sums up that it's a spiritual illness. Right. Having a spiritual illness means a lack of God, a disconnect, and that's why you think you're God, because you're not even connected.
Right. No, I've heard there's a lot of famous podcasters or famous artists that are now kind of talking publicly about their soberism and going through this program, and they say over and over again, like, you have to give up, like, until you hit rock bottom and you give up and you know that you're not in control, that's when you get control. So it's that same.
And this is a theme throughout King David's Psalms, through a broken heart, through just, shefel, ruach, to be broken, to have bending of knee, to be willing to surrender. These are all terminologies that a lot of people in the 12-step programs are familiar with.
Right. And it's interesting, though, because when you hear people speak of it these days, they talk about it being a spiritual, not a religious program. But it sounds like, at least from the early Bill Wilson or the founders of it, would you say that they were more religiously minded and it's kind of morphed into a spiritual program? Or?
What I think is that each person autonomously can advance and progress within their own religious framework. What they wanted to do was open it up that it is not just for Christians. And it was not a mission. I don't believe that it was a missionary tactic. I think that in truth, it is a spiritual illness, and therefore the steps, which are a spiritual way of life, is the only answer. I believe it's the only answer for every human being. And everyone's addicted to something, or they're at least constricted, they're in some type of bondage, whether it's self-made or imposed from the outside. And one can live a peaceful, serene way of life and a moral way of life, right? Like I don't want to get into the whole 7 Noachide laws here, but there is such a concept within Judaism that every human being is created in the image of God and can have a relationship with God, but it's spiritual in nature. And without getting down the rabbit hole in this, but to live a moral way of life with a connection to God. So it doesn't matter what your skeleton in the closet is, whether it's only thoughts, actions, whether it's a real addiction, whether it's an imaginary. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist. There are all kinds of mental challenges today, let's call it like that, or behavioral challenges that are listed, and they're giving out medicines, right?
Right.
So I'm not saying they don't help. Maybe they do. Perhaps they assist. It's really about behavior modification. And that really is a good lead-in to a certain extent. I'm sure you want to get to the idea of the divorce and the remarriage and making it, but life itself is about behavior modification. And there's no better way, honestly, to advance that is when you're sharing a small space with another human being. Because, like we said, not God. You wake up in the morning, you look in the mirror and you say, I'm God's gift to the world. I don't need to change. I'm perfect. But when you have a partner, says, they see all the warts and all your
sees you when the door's closed.
Huh?
Sees you when the door's closed.
Yeah. And, so as a single person, whether male or female, I can only imagine, and I have been single, but most of my life married, that you don't really have to work on too much. I mean, of course, you're going to have interactions with other people, and you're going to know that you said the wrong thing or acted the wrong way. But when you have a best friend, so to speak, who can remind you, which is, remember, there's going to be like the love-hate relationship. There's this, thorn in your side, but people don't really grow in what they call safe spaces. I think that's a very popular thing today. People are looking for the safe space, but very little growth can happen there. So marriage, I'm not here to promote marriage, although I am. I mean, that's my job as a rabbi. It's the bitter pill that really, I'm going to say, saves you. So we can get more into that as we go.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on that, and as I say at every interview, because I love when Joe Rogan, on he's got the famous podcast, he always says there's no structure to this, so we're going to jump around a bit, but you opened up something for me in terms of that idea of being alone. So, it says in the Bible, it's not good for a person to be alone. Would you say, because I know I think a lot of people kind of interpret that, maybe one can say it's not superficially, but in a certain sense, just in terms of sexuality, a person, a man should be with a woman and whatnot, and we're not getting into any sort of politics or ideologies, but it sounds to me from what you're saying, there's something more to that. It's about personal growth as well, and that being able to happen in a partnership versus being alone. Is that accurate?
Yes, so it's interestingly enough, not only should man not be alone, but he should leave his parents and meet up with what we call his Ezer Kenegdo. Those words in Hebrew is Ezer is a helpmate, a helper. Kenegdo means opposite him, literally opposite or against him, right? We talk about just growth, and not to get too much into sexuality here, but friction causes growth.
Well, we love sex. You can get into sex.
Okay. No, just in a more metaphysical term, right? Physically, the friction causes the growth sexually.
Got it.
Right? Okay. So emotionally and psychologically and everything else, it's going to be that kenegdo. It's that opposing force. And I'll just say it, men and women are different. so different.
What?
It's almost like it's actually a miracle. It's a miracle that we can even live together.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so we can go into that too.
Oh
Let's
yeah,
try this.
I'm taking notes. Yeah, the legal training. I got my legal pad over here.
Hashem has a good sense of humor, right?
Yeah. God, yeah.
So he created within us such an attraction that we would want to be with the other person, but if that attraction wasn't there, we probably would not get married. I know it sounds
No.
weird, cruel.
No,
It's a harsh reality.
I had a teacher that said basically the fact that men and women are supposed to get married and live with each other is counterintuitive to anything.
We are so different. So I joke with my friends when they marry somebody who's, let's say, very culturally different, like even though they don't even speak the same language, is that's the perfect marriage to come into, because you walk in knowing that you're not speaking the same language, as opposed to us who marry someone who's very culturally the same, speaks exactly the same language, and we think we know what they're saying when they say it. And the truth is, the Gemara, our oral Torah, tells us we not only speak a different language, we're a different species. Which is really hard pill to swallow, but once you're married for a while, I think you get the point.
Right. Well, I mean, would you say though? So a lot of our audience, I'm sure a lot of men may be thinking this as they're listening or watching this, that following the trauma of a divorce, it's difficult to envision getting into another relationship. If not right away, we even had a guest who said he's not interested in ever getting married again. And so what would you say, so it's a two-part question really. First part of my question is really, would you say it's healthy to take some time to sort of reevaluate oneself? Because that ties into what you were saying about, sort of needing that partner to help you grow. But on the other hand, one can say, well, I need some time to myself. There's just so much trauma involved. I've got to, because I have friends that got remarried literally within a couple of months of getting divorced. And I wonder if that's, or even get into serious monogamous relationships very quickly. Is that a good thing necessarily? So I'll ask that. I have another follow-up, but I'll go easy.
My answer would be everyone's different. I don't think that there is like a cookie cutter answer. They're going to be guys that really cannot function. If maybe they've been married, they saw their parents married forever, they got married young, and they had a long relationship, and maybe the spouse died. I mean, again, you're bringing up divorce, because divorce is more painful. Like, if the person's still alive, and you have to see them, and this could be children, could be so many complications involved.
That's so interesting you say that. I'll cut you off for a second because you just said it's more painful. Like, I find that, I went out with, I was set up for example, it wasn't a long-term thing, but I was set up with a woman who was a widow. And I found that I didn't want to offend her, but my view has been, now I didn't experience what it's like to physically lose a wife. My ex-wife is still alive, like you're saying. But I've said, there's a certain pain there where it kind of feels like the death of a spouse, but they're still there. And especially when there's children and there's constant communication, at least at our stages where the kids are younger. So it's interesting that you said that to me, because it really does feel like the death of someone who's still alive. And I find that I've been having trouble with closure, whatever that means, with that concept.
It could be for a woman, maybe women have to answer this for themselves, that the actual death of the husband is more painful than a divorce. I'm not sure. But for a man, I think for the man himself, the death of his wife, for sure it's painful. But I think that he knows he has to get on and move on. But let's talk about the living.
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
It's like surgery, right? In other words, halavai means if only it would be that we could find that one partner and live for the rest of our lives, right, until death do us part. Right? That would be the best situation in hopefully most situations. But the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the Bible explains that if there's irreconcilable differences, it just cannot be fixed, and it's not going to be good for the happiness of the family, maybe for the health of the children, for your own personal health, mental health, whatever it is.
Okay, so there is this surgery. Surgery itself would be painful, but the person, if it all depends on the situation. You have kids, it depends how old they are. If they're older, you have maybe less involvement. But again, you have children and grandchildren, and we call family simchas, where you're going to get together at a wedding or at a graduation, a bar mitzvah, whatever comes up. So the idea of mourning somebody in Judaism is that you're in a process of forgetting, and there's, let's say, a good psychological closure where you feel at the eulogy, the first 30 days, first week, the first 30 days, until a year goes by, and people do forget. When you're not in the presence of the person, okay, I'm sure it's painful, and my parents are still alive, but I'm sure it's painful, but there's an eventual forgetting. The idea of mourning in Judaism is to eventually have closure, a healthy closure, and move on. When it comes to divorce, I don't know how much closure you try to have when you, 3 years later, at a bar mitzvah of a child or a wedding of a grandchild later, you're going to have it. You're going to have that interaction. So it never really, that book never closes.
So how do you balance moving on, find somebody new, starting a new life with someone else, while that whatever trauma is
Every
always
situation,
back?
yeah,
I'm asking you,
I know.
and you.
Every situation would be different. In my case, the children were still young. I'm sure that you've heard these ideas that you take on a partner, or she takes on a partner, and the kids don't relate to that partner in any positive way. They could be resentful, there could be hate, there could be like, you can never replace my mother, I don't care how nice you are. I mean, it can get quite ugly and messy, and you need some outside help to just figure this out. But I think just in terms of, it's called patience, like even within the marriage itself, if people held on just a little bit longer, it could have been a solution and not fall into divorce. In many cases.
In your case, would you say that?
I think so, in my case as well.
Was it, and again, whatever you're comfortable answering, was it a sort of a mutual decision that you came
It
to?
ended up being mutual. It began with her, but at some point, some people say you should never have moved out. She requested me to move out. What if I didn't? Could we have resolved things, right? I mean, there's a million things you could think in your head, what if? But I think ultimately, if you were set up, we believe, right, God has a certain role to play in your match. Okay, mistakes can be made on our part, but if this is ultimately what we call your soulmate, and you're making beautiful children, and you're bringing up a healthy family, and something goes wrong, or maybe things were wrong from the beginning or throughout, and you seek help, but we're in a generation where we have this, it's called instant gratification. Now, obviously, instant doesn't always mean instant, but we don't have the patience. If we would have just stuck it out a little longer with the right help, maybe things could have been different.
Well, it's interesting you
So,
say that.
again,
Oh, sorry,
no,
go
I
ahead.
just wanna say,
Sorry.
Look, each person, especially what I tried to do, was hold on as long as possible. And people say, that whatever you did was not long enough. So we were separated for 9 months.
Wow.
And for me, that was like an eternity.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to get back together and move things along. And she said, I'm still thinking. Well, and it's not going to work. And when she said she's still thinking, I think the communication was, it's not going to happen.
Right.
And at least that's how I read it.
I remember you talking about patience. I remember when I met with when I saw that it's happening, and I met with my attorney, and he said to me, he's like, exactly what you're saying. If you would just hold on like another few years, you're going to be, and it's painful. It's painful for me to say it today, even though I've been divorced for a couple of years. He said, if you just hold on, you're going to get into grandchildren, and exactly like you're talking about the events and I said, I know, but it takes two to tango, and you know, sometimes we don't have that choice. But I think it's important for people to hear that. If there's anybody in any of our audience is contemplating it, really that it's such a strong message that you're sharing. I'm so happy you're sharing it. That just hold, you know, sometimes some cases there are irreconcilable differences. I'm not, you know, it's not a one size fits all. It depends on the circumstance. But in many cases, I would say from my limited experience, more cases than not, just hang on and work through it, and you're going to get to the next phase of life. You know, because life is not that long. It is, but it's not. But anyway.
Just to skip back to this point,
Yeah.
we were talking about the death, how painful or not painful is, what's worse, divorce. I think for a woman, I mean, I don't know how many women are listening to this podcast, but
50 million.
you know, sometimes you divorce and you figure you're moving on, and she's not. Even though it might have even been initiated by her, didn't finish with her. You carried it through, did the divorce. But in the end, I'm moving on, and she still feels like she's married to you.
Wow.
Like, the connection is there, like, ready to argue or fight, like you were still living together.
How does that work? I know you're not a psychologist, but you know, this is something I've had this discussion with many people. I'm not going to name names, but I find that even in the context of, even when, like you said, even if the woman initiated it, and even if they're in another relationship, could even be married, still there is that energy where I you know, you kind of feel like they're acting like they're still married. You know what I mean? And so is there any, did you ever, like, is
I
there
don't
any
know.
explanation?
My
or-
ex-wife, when she got remarried, things did change for the better. So I don't know.
Okay.
I think every situation is going to be different.
Right,
But it
right,
took a long time.
right.
I got married quite quickly, like a year and a half later. I was already married, and I think it was like 5, 6, I don't even know, 8 years later she got remarried. So
Did you find that it was, you can't get inside her head, but do you find that she took it hard, either through your direct communications, you noticed something, or maybe through what the children said, the fact that you moved on quickly? I mean, a year and a half's a long time also, but
I don't
relatively not, you know.
So the best thing once you divorce is not to try to get into their head anymore. That's okay when you're married. I think it's praiseworthy, right? This is like the ideal of becoming one flesh. Really, one flesh is not just sexual, and it doesn't just mean children. It means literally, okay, let me just go way back. What's love? The word
What is love? It's a famous song.
Love is all you got.
What is love? Yeah.
So in Hebrew, the word love, the root is give. Is give.
Really?
Hav. It's actually
Right.
Aramaic, but
Right.
Hav, ahava. Ahava is love. Hav means to give.
Brilliant. I never even heard that. Wow.
So how do you ever, like, what is giving? It's like, I'm giving because I want to give. This is what I think you need. Or in real love is, what do I think you need? Like, I have to ask you. I have to get into your head. Because well, you should accept it because I'm giving it to you, or I'm giving you because I feel this is what you're lacking, or this is what I know that you want. Like, so when you're married, you're having a relationship, you want to be one flesh. I think that's an idea of giving, like a real gift. Now, you see some poor person on the street, and you want to give him, okay, here's a pair of shoes. He doesn't want shoes. He wants a cup of coffee, or he wants $1 for drugs. I don't know, whatever, cigarette. Like, no, I'm just saying, like, he doesn't need shoes. If he needs shoes, that's what you give him. You just give him because you feel this is, I want to give him the shoes, or what does he need? So when with any relationship, I think you really, one should open their own mind, figure out what it is that the person either asks for, let them express it. Sometimes you have to ask your partner, what is it you need? What is it you want? Sometimes we're all wrapped up in ourselves. And that's also a problem with today, but we're too wrapped up in ourselves.
Do you find that you've been able to take lessons that you've learned, assuming that there are, from what happened the first time around?
I was going to open up, we didn't have podcasts back then, but I said, I'm going to write a book. The book is going to be everything not to do.
Yeah, that's I always say the same thing. You know, I'm qualified to talk about, you know, many things what not to do. You know, but
I want to help you because the pain. You broke down. You know, the pain is like you'll never forget it. Was it my pain, or was I feeling my children's pain? Was I feeling my dreams of my children? Whatever I thought of is the ideal was broken. So the pain was there. So I look, wanting to help other people not feel that pain. That was so important to me. Like if I have nothing, I'm broken, but I got one thing that's so valuable, and that is what not to do, because this will lead to that pain. So this is all I felt. I felt that I could do that.
So what would be in that book?
Oh,
Top five. Top five.
that's really put me on the spot. Okay, so let's say you want to know the top five. So now I'm now in my head of my new marriage, right? Maybe it was 14, 15 years ago. I don't remember what it was then, but let's say I internalized what it was, and it is more open communication, more letting the spouse know that I really do, like expressing that I really do love you, and I'm interested in what you want, what makes you happy, as opposed to, I was young, I think she was young, she was younger than me, and we're just maturing. Now, I'm a more mature person.
Right.
So, what is it that you really want? So for her, maybe it's true by most women, they really want to know that you are not just dependable, but you're there for them. Even if you're not always there for them, I mean, whether you travel, whether you have a busy life, a busy schedule, you have your children, whatever it is, that you are there for them. And that means you have to express it, not just in words,
Right.
but you have
Action.
to be there at certain times where you would have thought, okay, it's a grown woman. No, we're all human beings, and women are much more sensitive than men, just in case you didn't know.
Not always. Not
That's
always.
true.
Not always. Yeah.
I used to do a lot of traveling, so a lot less traveling. It was very, very important. What else have I implemented or that I would have told people? I think that's really the most important thing, is to be there for her, or at least to show her or to let her know. Like really, like not just verbiage. There has to be some concrete action. A lot of sacrifice. A lot of sacrifice. Because this is you. You are her. We are one. Like in Judaism, it says that a man must treat his wife with more respect than he treats himself. In other words, we have the idea of you have the mitzvah, the obligation to love your neighbor as yourself. So we say, okay, if you don't love yourself, how can you ever love your neighbor? Okay, so it doesn't mean you have to give up your life for the neighbor. But you should not do unto him as you would not want done unto yourself. It's still a distance. They're not you. But your wife, it's minimally you. Like, she is you. Like, everything that she needs, you would do everything for her. So why wouldn't you do it for her? Because she's you. You would do it for yourself. So this is, at least show her that. Let her know that's your goal. That's what you really want to do. So you're human. You're not always able to. Things come up.
What do you do if you find that it's a certain lifestyle or certain things that a person's spouse wants that doesn't align with your values? Like I from personal experience, I mean, this was more towards the end anyways, one can say, but I felt that, certain things that my then wife wanted or desired did not align with my values. And I could get into tons of specifics, but I won't. So what does one do in that situation? Is there, I don't know if it's an easy answer.
No, it's probably not an easy answer, but number one, the lines of communication have to be open, and to the point where you say, look, we're on two different pages. Why don't we choose somebody that we both agree that we trust, at least to give an objective or outside perspective. Doesn't mean you have to follow what they say, but at least to get it. There's a breakdown in communication. I mean, like, at least, let's say, it's hard to say that you can do what you want and I'll do what I want. Right? If your values are that different. that could be irreconcilable. However, I know people, let's say, for example, where one spouse observes Shabbat and the other one doesn't. Listen, when they came into the marriage, they were both young and they both either kept it or they both didn't keep it. And as they progressed in life, one either went up or down in their observance. It's a very difficult thing. I don't know. I mean, we have a lot of, let's say, this is a B'nai Noach, this is a Gentile thing, where we have one left the church and the other one is still in the church. Meaning, when I say left the church, it means they gave up idols and they believe in one God of Israel, but they're not going to convert to Judaism. And the other one is still, I don't know, bows down to idols of sorts. It's a very difficult situation. These are like real different values. And sometimes in the end, it breaks up. At least they weren't arguing. They could still remain friends. They could all, there's all kinds of reasons why people break up. Whether it's like they can't stand each other's presence or they just have a major disagreement about lifestyle. So I don't know what to tell you. I mean, maybe that's the better kind of breakup. Maybe that's the worst. Because you always knew this was your partner, just to see the eye on something. I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Did you ever find yourself in your current marriage where you're like conscious that you're kind of slipping into old patterns and you have to catch yourself? Did that ever happen?
Yeah, I'll give an example. I was brought up being very critical. And we have in Judaism a certain idea that one should not be too critical, at least the male to the female. I don't know if such a thing exists on the other side. Perhaps. So women are much more sensitive to criticism. I mean, when you think, just let's say superficially, when she's about to go out and she asks you if she looks good or if she has the right dress on. I mean, as long as she looks decent, I don't care,
Right.
Like, not like a schlump. I don't know
Right.
if schlump is a known word. Anyway.
Schlump. I think our audience gets it. Yeah.
So, in my, present marriage, criticism is definitely one of those issues that comes up. And I think that's the beauty, having a long-term relationship. People who have short-term relationships never really have an opportunity to grow because, something becomes uncomfortable and that's it. Start afresh, and you never really have to follow up with a nitty-gritty long-term, issue facing you every morning when you get up. So, we say in Judaism, right? Obviously, we're interested in knowledge and gaining wisdom, but if you don't put it, number one, into practice or work on your character, it's all for naught. In other words, the fear, the awe of Hashem, of God, is so important. But the Vilna Gaon, the famous Gaon from Vilna, it's not a secret. He says that the purpose of life is to change a character. And so there's a statement, even though we read volumes of called the Talmud, a famous statement is, it's harder to change a character trait than to gain all the wisdom. Right? That's the real work. And I want everyone to know that the work is enjoyable. I know it's hard, and it could be painful, but no pain, no gain. This is another concept in Judaism, right?
And
According
football.
to the effort is the reward. And this is like really key in marriage, as my experience will tell you, but other people as well. The real joy in life is when you're able to actually correct a character trait, and when you have a partner to do it with, you kind of have like a measuring rod. It's not like I just think I worked on it. It's like when you do a pH test, whatever, you have the proof right in the pudding.
Objective.
Objective. Has it changed? Did it make a difference? And then you'll have a much more enjoyable relationship.
Right.
When you're able to correct those
And be honest. The honesty.
Honest, that's going to be even like in the AA program, right? The people who don't recover, it's because they were not capable of being honest with themselves. Same thing in a marriage or any relationship. It's not gonna work if you're not even honest with yourself about it, right?
Right. That's what I was going to say. Growth isn't automatic. In other words, one can go into another relationship but be, would you say it could be the same person and not grow from it or not learn from past experiences? And it may seem great or it's wonderful. It's a new person in my life, and they're opening all these energy channels and I'm feeling wonderful. He or she isn't like the last one. It seems great, but there could be no growth.
Until she finds out that you have the hidden defect, right? So
which could take years to come out, right? It could be right away. It could be
triggers, right? But
right.
also, we think in Judaism, Hashem, God, sets us up with exactly the person we need to make the tikkun, the fix. So, there might be infatuation and love and all kinds of, attraction and chemistry going on in the beginning. But as you, get closer and closer and know each other better and better, then the triggers will come through, and that's when you really have to be honest with yourself, and she'll help you.
Well, this may be not to get into a theological discussion, although we have a little bit, I guess, in a certain sense, and you are a rabbi, but, what would you say, if anything, to somebody who says, okay, I can understand how it can be important for growth to be with another person, but I don't want to get remarried. I just want to be in a long-term monogamous relationship. Maybe this is a question more for those that go by the Orthodox, however you want to say it, religious Jewish faith or whatever. But is there something? I guess my question is there something to the concept of marriage in and of itself, a remarriage, as opposed to saying, I'm going to be in a monogamous relationship. We're going to move in together. We'll be common law, from your perspective, obviously.
So in Hebrew, the marriage is kedushin. It's actually holy. I think they call it
holy matrimony.
Right?
Yep.
That's a very common expression.
Yep.
I have a confession. I watched I don't remember, more than once, a few times, the ceremony of a marriage in Britain between a prince and
right, Charles and Diana.
The royal wedding.
A royal wedding, and I cried. It reminded me so much of the biblical values, the values that we, the Jewish peoples, there was no such thing as marriage before. I'm saying we invented it before God told us this is what has to be done. So there are the vows in Judaism is really one-sided, right? The man really is going to take full responsibility to care for, feed, clothe, shelter, nurture the soul of the woman. I'm sure the woman is interested in reciprocity, but she's not there's no obligation, like contractual obligation for her to do your laundry, to cook for you, or to do many of those things. It's more like you're taking care of her, you're putting everything out, and she's willing to. So I mentioned about the marriages of these royal marriages. It's just the more the ritual part, where they're really making this commitment. In front of millions of people, right? Because these are some of the most watched things. But it just reminds me of the commitment that the husband is really taking on the wife, and that it's so holy matrimony. You're like in front of God. You're like, and everybody that that you're taking on this huge responsibility. Look, as opposed to people who don't really have a commitment. I don't want to say what I see in the secular world, because we all know what we see, right?
Well, even in the religious world these days, one could say. I've noticed in the religious world, even that there's a trend, if you will, where people are saying, we're out, we're religious in our way, and as I would say in
are you saying an open marriage? Is that what you're
not open marriage, just to say, you know what? Yes, I'm religious, but I've been through it. I've been married. I've gone through the pain of divorce, and I don't want to have that a second time around. Why should I? I can tell you how many, even being in taxi drivers here in Israel, as you know, the taxi drivers love to talk, and every one of them, religious or not, is like, don't do it again. Just meet somebody, just be in a relationship. There seems to be this trend, religious or not, to say, we're going to move in together. We're going to be common law. why do I have to put it on a piece of paper? That's the difference.
Okay, look, we're sliding into a very gray area, because even in Judaism, a common law, I don't know what that means exactly, but let's just say everyone
Living
knows
together.
living
Let's say
together,
living
but it's
together.
public knowledge they're living together. According to Jewish law, the woman would need a get to get remarried. And therefore, you would unfortunately be creating, I don't even know how to translate the word mamzer, but let's say children that would not be able to just be able to marry anybody. You're again, maybe it's older people that are not going to have kids.
Right, I was gonna say, if they don't have
Okay.
children.
But let's just say you're entering a relationship, she would still need a get. I mean, they would call in Hebrew HSC. She's a married woman, and that would be an adulterous relationship if she just moved out one day after, say 2-3 years of having a relationship. She could not get married. That would be called adultery until she got a get, until she got a proper divorce. So you think you're cutting through the bureaucracy, so to speak, and you're just creating more problems.
I mean, there's also, the law part of it. So with marriage comes all the, if you get divorced law, that, for a lot of guys have gotten the raw end of it.
Okay,
So there is that trepidation, I'm sure,
okay.
about,
So you could make, and I'm not saying this should be done, I'm just saying, a prenuptial agreement where you can agree that already, if there was a divorce, what could be with the legal aspect at the end, financially. I know many people who are in a second or third marriage, and they have a wealth. When you're young and you get married, you didn't build up wealth. But by the time your second marriage or third marriage, you may have houses, you may have boats, you may have cars, whatever it is. You may have a company that you came in the marriage with, that you want to make sure that if there was ever a split, that could stay on your side. So I'm not just saying that's a solution, but I think that could avoid a lot of the, you say, trepidation or hesitation to enter this. I think it's the pain part, right? Because even getting into a relationship and having what you call a civil law marriage for how many years, could be 10, 20, 30 years, and then splitting up, it's going to be painful, just as painful. Well, it was only the financial part? No. It was the heart being broken, and all the, again, getting married later in life, the likelihood of having more kids is diminished. That's
right.
So you're not going to have that kind of pain that you would with the children when you got married young and had children.
But let's say that for our audience who's not Jewish, or or those who are not religious in any way.
By Gentiles, there's no kedushin in that sense, and they're not committed, so there's no legal aspect.
Would you say though that there's a general value with the idea of getting remarried versus just being in an open relationship, or it does depend on the religious faith?
I think that Jewish wisdom says a lot, and without being religious, one can glean so much from Jewish wisdom as a Gentile, as a non-Jew, and take it for what it's worth. Right? There's a lot about relationships. There's so many rabbis and Jewish professionals online where you can just learn about relationships, and that's my suggestion for the non-Jewish world, the Jewish world as well. But if you want to stay in what they call a civil law marriage for a non-Jew, go for it. But at least make the best of it. It's like, why are you doing it? Just because you're lonely, or because you want sex, or two are better than one. King Solomon said, 2 are better than 1. So maybe even for financial reasons. There's all kinds of good reasons why to have a partner. But at least in Judaism, we think of a sanctity and bringing children into the world in a sanctified way, and carrying on the values for, I would say, eternity, but let's say generations to come. How the Gentiles, I'm sorry, I'm not a Gentile, so I never even think of that way, but there is a lot of Jewish wisdom, and I hope that's not just the prince and the royal weddings of Britain, but all of mankind has learned a lot from Jewish wisdom.
Although even there, one could be cynical and say the royal wedding broke up; it didn't last.
They're even in Hollywood, they spend millions of dollars. I mean, I don't even know the numbers, but just on the wedding alone, hundreds of thousands, and then 3 weeks later or 3 hours later, there's a breakup.
I actually just heard an interview with Kid Rock, and he was saying, "I love getting married. It's the marriage part's of the problem. It's like I got married 5 times, 4 to the same person. I got married here and here and here. I just like getting married. It's the marriage part that's the problem."
No, but I was going to mention a celebrity of my own. I mean, Ben Affleck. It's interesting that he had a very public. Forgive me, I don't know if you know Ben Affleck's a famous actor in Hollywood, actor, director, producer, and we want to have him on our show. And he went through a very public divorce, and he's very open about it in his interviews and the pain, and he has children as a father. But sure enough, he got remarried. It's just interesting to see that, as far as I know, I don't think he has any sort of religious reason to do it. And yet, there are people even in Hollywood who see a value in actually getting remarried as opposed to just, he didn't have to get remarried,
So let's not even use the word religious. Let's use the word spiritual. Everyone is a spiritual person. And whether they're consciously aware or subconsciously, there's a drive, like the Bible said, for a man to leave his parents' home and attach himself, and the same thing with the woman. We're human. We're not animals. We're different. And so I think there's a drive, and that's why I'm suggesting, even for the Gentiles, to glean the Jewish wisdom. You're going to have the relationship. I mean, unless you are same sex attraction, so maybe you're going to have a different kind of relationship, let's just say. But at least we're talking about the relationship between that Ezer Kenegda, that person who's so opposite you. It's a spiritual journey. Life is a spiritual journey, and this is key. This is part of it. I think we spoke about in the beginning. And there's a guide. And the guide is the Bible for us, or at least, let's say, Jewish wisdom for the world. And there are so many, from YouTube to whatever, books. I think even in the books, bookstore, if they still have them, like self-help or, right? It's if the most popular section is self-help. So in Judaism, the most popular way of advancing and progressing in character development is with a partner who will be, and I use the word critical, but what they call constructive criticism. That's the Ezer Kenegda. That was we talked about the helpmate that's opposite you. And so it all boils down to what we call spiritual principles and spiritual wisdom. And let's not use the word religion, because many people are not religious, and they can still benefit from being married, as opposed to just being in a monogamous relationship. And again, it's different by Gentiles. They can be in that, and should be, in some type of monogamous relationship. Why not?
Now, in terms of, we mentioned at the outset, you have 6 children, thank God, and grandchild. When you got remarried, did you have and you mentioned also how it could be challenging when you bring in a new person into your life. It could be challenging for the children. Did you have any sort of discussion with your kids as a dad? When that happened,
We
as it was happening.
Everyone tried. I did the best I could. It was a very difficult situation because when you already know that they have a special love for their own mother, and that, let's say, whether it's psychologically or it's known in the world that stepmothers have a bad
rap
From Cinderella on.
So what are your chances, right? And the only thing is patience and showing love, but there's too much going on, right? With the kids and with your spouse. I mean, you're now concentrating on them to a great extent, and you're worried about how they're going to feel, and you're worried about the way your kids feel. So a lot of patience, a lot of communication. You do the best you can.
How old were the kids?
They were quite young. I mean, my oldest was probably, I think, 14. We had all the way down to just a few, I think 5 years old.
And did your new wife, did she have any kids?
No, she never had any kids. She was unfortunately.
Okay.
She actually did have a young boy that she was like a mid-to-pellet, a helper in the home for,
Okay.
from the age of 8 months.
Wow.
And he is still in our lives. She's like his
Wow.
adopted child.
Wow.
Yeah, quite. She actually worked for that family for like 8 years. And then even after those 8 years were over, still involved very much in his
Wow.
life.
Nice.
So but still, it's not the same as having
Yeah.
your own children, but it's close second.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wow.
So yeah, I guess having a little bit of a fear, like if she never had children, how's she going to deal with my own children? But we worked it out, and they love her, and she loves them.
So in the end, it worked out.
Yeah, a lot of patience. We started from the beginning with that idea. No matter what hits you in life, you know, just to react, we call knee-jerk reactions, are usually never productive. I mean, there are maybe times, we can think of a handful of times, maybe, that it was the right move.
Right.
But in most cases, it's better to count to 10, maybe longer.
And going backwards, how did your role as a father, like, were you conscious of that when you got divorced? Did it impact how you viewed yourself as a father, your relationship with your children? I mean, obviously it impacted. But
Yeah, for sure it did. And listen, I went through quite a depression. You know, it was like very hurtful and harmful to me. I almost couldn't get out of bed, but because I was in a ritual of getting out every single morning to go to synagogue, I think that's really what kept me sane.
Wow.
To wrap on the tefillin and spend half an hour, 45 minutes with the same people every day.
Wow.
Relationships are very important.
Yeah.
People could see how you're doing, whether it was for social, I mean, in addition to the religious aspect, a social thing, having relationships, jobs, like if you're doing a certain business, you can get contacts, people you're with regularly, they know what you're going through, and whether it's business contacts, a therapist, whatever it is, you need help because you don't have your partner, your wife. Who
Or
live with
you didn't have any family here, did you?
No, that's another thing. People who come to Israel, I mean, Olim, people who made Aliyah to Israel, in most cases, I mean, I was young when I came here, I was 23, 24, so my only family here was my tragic, story of what was developing, of the breakup and the young children. So yeah, you were all alone. So having an anchor of going to synagogue, perhaps people go to church. I have no idea what other people do every day.
Right. The gym.
So the gym. Important to have an anchor, having friends. Don't isolate yourself. Don't hide. Try to get out there because I think it could be tragic ending if you feel all alone and the pain. So as normal, I say normal, maybe it's not normal, but average breakups with young kids, so you basically share custody, if you're lucky, and then you have, if they basically live with her because I had a studio apartment, I left her the house.
Right.
Okay, so that's the way it was, but we lived like 2 blocks away, so it was really convenient. After school they would come, but I couldn't really host them in my house. I mean, I had a very small kitchenette, and I knew how to cook, so I would make dinners, and they would come for dinner, so that would be good. They come after school, so they could do their homework. But to really make them feel at home, I didn't have. I was really lacking. So Malcha Mall had just opened, or whatever it was. I would take them to the mall, and we'd go from one store to another. We'd buy food at the supermarket. We'd have a little lunch sometimes. There's like a peanut chai. It's like a petting zoo for rabbits. So we would sit there for like an hour, and then we would go to the ice cream. And then so we had activities. There was always something to do.
Did your fathering change? Were you a different dad after?
I think I was, again, less critical. Could be that I was also quite critical. Trying to bring up my children a certain way, and now there was like competition. Which parent could be the nicest? Right? I mean, that's like a sad part because I think that takes a toll on the children. I'm
Right.
not sure that's so healthy. Guilty. Right? what are you going to do? You know, you wouldn't have bought them the what do they call cotton candy, but now you're going to buy them the cotton candy.
It's so
Right.
interesting.
You know.
Yeah.
So then we would you know, take them to the pool, and then we would camping, whatever it is I could do to outside of the house to keep some
Right.
kind of, you know, relationship and fun
Right.
going. So yeah. That was, I think what I just touched upon could be quite controversial, because where does the discipline come from?
Mm.
You know, when you're living together and you're doing the best you can to bring some kind of sanity or order to the house. So you have like you're in a familiar place. Now, you know, they're going through turmoil. You're going through turmoil. You're the adult in the house. And that, you know, you want to be loved, you want to be kind, considerate, and this, you have to be careful not to overdo it on the chesed, on the kindness.
Right.
You still have to have what we call a little bit more
Mm.
judgment or ruling,
Structure.
but you're in a you have to juggle it.
But over time,
If the
you
other spouse is lenient, you're
Right.
gonna look like, who wants to spend time with you then?
but, I hear you. But over time, did you kind of find more of a groove of a balance of, you know, or was it always kind of that way?
A balance in terms of,
Of discipline, structure, and fun?
Listen,
Or
it could be that
there's no judgment.
I don't know. I
I'm
don't
just
know if there was a
curious.
balance. It could be that, you know, when things came up that really needed the discipline. So since you weren't disciplining all the time, you only, you know, disciplining once in a while.
Right.
It could have made that made or broke, you know, where they are today, because they're actually unbelievable, great kids. Thank God.
And you have a strong relationship with them.
Yeah, as much as I can. I mean, the truth is that we live in different countries at this point.
Oh,
Some
wow.
of them.
Okay.
When we first broke up and there was a divorce, so they lived 2 blocks away. And
Right.
we did this, as I described, spending a lot of time. But after in Israel, they go to the army. So the army, you don't really see the children that often. And then the university, in a different city, and then they moved to Tel Aviv. The ex-wife moved to Tel Aviv, so even the younger kid he didn't see as often. I mean, they would come to my house every other week, for Shabbos, for Shabbat. And during the weekday, you know,
Right.
during the weekdays, 1 or 2 days a week. Now they're in Tel Aviv, so maybe it's once a month. I was going there, they were coming here. It was much easier if they had reason to be here. They're younger. It's easier for them to get around.
Right.
Now 3 of them live in the States. Actually, after I would say after 3 years of not traveling, I'm going next week to the States. But we had family. Simply we have family get-togethers, and so they actually have come over the last few years quite often,
Nice.
more than once a year.
Mm.
My parents I haven't seen in 3 years, so that would be a nice visit. You know, talking through Skype.
It's much easier now.
What's the other thing?
WhatsApp.
WhatsApp
and-
video.
WhatsApp all the time.
FaceTime. Yeah.
It's still not the same, but yeah. So the relationships, Baruch Hashem, thank God, are still very strong.
And I wanted to ask you about those family joyous events, simchas, as you put it, in Hebrew. How is that in terms of balancing being there for your children? I don't know how many you've made weddings, right? So how is that balancing being there for your children with having to coordinate that with your ex-wife, and you know how that looks also in terms of your ex-wife's family, because there's a lot of dancing. I'm sure every wedding in every religion or every culture, but how did that look? Because I've got time, but I'd be lying if I didn't say it hasn't dawned on me.
The fact that she remarried makes it so much easier, right? When you had these functions where she was still not married, I think things were much more uncomfortable.
Why?
I don't know. I think for her, not for me.
Mm-hmm.
If I can say that. It's just an educated guess.
Mm-hmm.
But dealing with the intricacies of children's wedding also, if we didn't get along, we didn't see eye to eye, and we argued over things, so what's going to happen now? Right? So I just have to say, in our case, we tried, it didn't work, and now I speak to her husband. When it comes to the financial matters, whatever we're involved with, I speak to him and things go quite smoothly.
Okay.
I have no idea how it's going to work for anybody else, but it seems to work for us.
And at a wedding, where you're dancing and there's different family, like her side, so to speak, and your side, was that
Just very
maybe
cordial. Everyone
superficial,
is very
but
nice.
yeah, it
Nobody
wasn't
wants
awkward
to-
or anything
No
like that.
chairs are flying.
That's what I'm saying. You're able to all dance together.
Yeah. With the
Interesting.
pictures together, everything.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, because it's for the kids.
Mm.
It's for posterity. It's for the future. Everyone's a smile. No arguing. No discussion. It's all behind the scenes. Just talk to him. Talk to the husband, and that's it.
You look good in the tux. I've seen on your fridge. You've got a nice picture of you in the tux.
You find out what works
Mm.
and stay away from what doesn't work.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that's going to work for everybody. That works for me, and it should continue.
So on our podcast, we like to get one too dad to quit moment, a moment where it was, dad can do it all, or I can't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm the dad. I need to be there. And we'd love to hear one of your too dad to quit moments.
Listen, I don't have a car. Now, I had 5 cars, but I don't have a car now, so I have a Corkinut. The Corkinut is a
Scooter.
It's a scooter. You can fold it up and take it on the train. So I do that a lot of times when I go to visit my kids. And just driving around Tel Aviv on that scooter, I would think that's too much of a dad to give up.
You look so cool, by the way, ripping down Jerusalem. So in Tel Aviv, man.
Yeah,
And I don't move for anybody, and I drive in the bike lane. But when there's no bike lane, I'm driving on the right side, as close to the curb, and I have people screaming out the window, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" With the tzitzis flying in Tel Aviv.
Fringes.
They're not so happy about
So
me.
you just yell back, "I'm going to visit my kids."
I wish.
And for all those that are listening, he looks like a rabbi, gray beard, tzitzit, the fringes hanging off, and I'm sure with the helmet on, flying down on a scooter would turn a bunch of heads. So the last thing we like to leave everyone with is, because this podcast is focusing on and trying to help the guys and dads that are going through divorce. So some advice that you would give that helped you get through that hard period of time during the divorce, after the divorce. I think you have some wisdom that we could really use.
I think that it's a complicated question. Everyone is a little different. To enhance their faith, not only in any kind of superior being, but in themselves. Too many men go into a depressive state. So you need like an anchor. That was let's say, the social relationships you have, but with God. In other words, along with some kind of supernatural power, supernal power, but the truth is it's within you. And so get in touch with that. Don't let yourself get so down. If it's not a done deal, try everything you can. Try to leave no rock unturned. Is that an expression?
Yep.
So that later on you don't have any regrets that you didn't do something. Because it is painful. Again, everyone's in a different situation, whether you have children, whether they're grown up, whether they're young. Or could just destroy you financially. It could destroy you psychologically. So to be anchored as much as you can with friends, social network, and with a higher power, whether it's within you or external, which both. And that's really what I suggest.
Great.
You can give me a call. Why not? You can always just reach out.
Yeah. So how can people reach you if they do want to reach out to you? What's
So
the
on
best
my
way?
website, yibanet.com, in the contact, we do have a phone number, email.
Great.
And as far as I know, the WhatsApp, you can call anywhere in the world and it's free. So don't hesitate.
Perfect. And this episode of the podcast is sponsored by my book, Do You Have Any Patience? You can find it on Amazon. We want to hear from you, and we want to hear everyone's stories. Please get in touch with us. We're Too Dad to Quit on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and on the web. And we really want to hear from you. We want to hear your story, share your story. There's a lot that you can give to other dads going through this. And we really appreciate you. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe and like.
Thank you so much for doing this, Rabbi Poston. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for listening to the Too Dad to Quit podcast. Available at toodadtoquit.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.